uh, we're joined on the Crispin Flintoff show by Vanessa Beeley, independent journalist, now based in Lebanon. Is that right, Vanessa? How are you doing?
hmm Yeah, I'm not too bad. Sorry, I'm not standing up in case people thinking I am. I am sitting down, but I had the kind of tripod at quite a high level, and I'm not going to change it now because I'll probably drop the phone. Sorry.
Oh, it's on the phone. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. It's a good
Yeah.
picture. Um, well, look, I was hoping to speak to you last Sunday because of what was going on in Syria. I mean, or last Friday actually. But I was hearing reports that it was difficult for you to talk to anyone at that time. So you were in your flat in Damascus,
hmm
and when did you start thinking that you were in any kind of danger of these people who might be coming in to attack or break?
Well, yeah, on the Saturday, I received a message saying, like, you've got to get out immediately. I then made a few phone calls and I was basically told to stand down, that everything was okay, everything was under control. I was also told that there was potential for a ceasefire. And at that point, there were statements saying that Assad would stay, that there would be a transitional government and there would be 6 months he would remain, and then he would basically hand over to whichever government was elected at that point. And so he was going to stand down, but everything was kind of going to be um, tampered down so that there wasn't any risk to people inside Syria. And then so basically I didn't really go to bed, but I sat back down. I'd already packed one bag and a few bits and pieces that were the essentials. I obviously couldn't take all the belongings that I'd gathered over 5 years. And then I think it was a few hours later, I received a message to say, look, they're in the outskirts of Damascus, and I'm living on the outskirts of Damascus. So at that point, we knew, and I could hear gunfire. I could hear Israel had started using bunker buster bombs on the air defense. And I'm very close to two major air defense bases. Both of them are only about 5 kilometers away from me. So the house was shaking from the bunker buster bombs that Israel was using to destroy all of the military installations in and around that area of Damascus. And then we started to hear, or I started to hear, the machine gun, the celebratory machine gun fire literally all around me. They were firing in the garden, they were firing at the houses, they were firing at pretty much anything that moved. So we knew at that point they were here. So it was a case of just all the lights were off anyway because we don't have electricity in Damascus. So the place was in darkness. So that, of course, added to the fact that we couldn't really see them. We could just hear them. And so I had to just sit it out all night. I was speaking to various people. They told me that the border was closed because basically the police and the security had stood down. So there was no one actually at the border to kind of stamp passports and process people trying to get out. So it was a waiting game until about 9, 10 a.m. the next morning, and they were firing all night. It didn't stop. And as I said, sometimes they were firing into the garden. I had to keep the dogs inside. They, of course, were extremely stressed out with what was going on. And then at around between 9 and 10, I think closer to 10, they started trying to break the door down to the
In the
house.
morning,
They,
at 10 in
yeah,
the morning, right?
yeah. So they started like hammering on there's like an outside gate. I live in a house, not in an apartment, so I was completely alone. There weren't any other people in the building with me. Uh, and the dogs went crazy, and I just yelled at them in the Arabic that I have to go away, basically. And after about 3 tries, they went. But what they were obviously doing was trying to figure out if houses were empty, because a lot of people had kind of left the area the day before, knowing that there was potential for them entering. So many of the houses were empty. So they were basically looting stealing cars that had been left on the street, stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. Like basically, if you look at the groups that were weaponized by the West, they also comprise, let's say, the petty criminals, the kind of low-life criminals in Syria joined the armed groups because for them it was an opportunity, as you
So
said,
these are
it was an
hangers-on of the
opportunity.
armed groups,
Yeah,
effectively.
yeah,
Right, I
basically.
see,
And
right.
they came in from the areas of Damascus countryside close to me. So from, I mean, it won't mean much to a lot of people, I guess, but from Wadi Barada, Dimas, all of which are areas about 10 minutes away from me. So they came in almost in advance of the armed groups. In fact, they are still the entity that's occupying the area where I used to live. HTS hadn't actually made it that far out yet to impose their own martial law there. And so the risk is still very high of them breaking into the houses and stealing, although my neighbor called me 2 days after I left and told me that they formed a committee with guns and they're patrolling all the time to make sure that the houses are safe. So now there is some kind of uneasy calm, and the looting has stopped, but the area is still occupied. There's only really 2 entrances to it, and people are not allowed in many days, and they're definitely not allowed to take anything out from the house. So my dogs that I left behind, that I had made arrangements to take them to friends of mine there and in Lebanon for safety, are still stuck in the house because no one can actually take them out.
Oh, no. So what happened when these people who were possibly going to loot your property, what happened when they went away? Did you decide to leave then? How did you get out?
Yeah, I mean, then I, through a number of phone calls, my driver who normally takes me to Lebanon came, and we really quickly threw all my stuff in. I took one dog with me, poor thing, was thrown in the back of the car. And at this point, there were, armed groups all over the place. But we just did everything as fast as possible. He was amazing. I mean, in all honesty, I couldn't have asked for a better driver. He was so freaking brave. He just drove through all the lines of armed groups in the area where I was. And then when we got to the border, um, I keep saying it was kind of like a Mad Max scene. There were just pickup trucks and motorbikes all over the place. They were looting everything, stealing everything, including duty-free whiskey and gin and vodka from the border duty-free shop. And it was almost impossible to get through. There was no security, no police, just these armed gangs, all of them armed, all of them slinging guns over their shoulders. There was fighting amongst them. And he just persisted. He just kept driving in one direction, then he'd get blocked, so then he was reversing and driving in another direction. And in the end, he pretty much kind of rammed his way through them. And we got through the border. My passport wasn't looked at. And I think I had the advantage that they were so focused on the looting, they weren't really paying attention to who I was. I mean, not that they would know who I was, but they would see I'm a foreigner
Right.
trying to leave the country. So there may have been some questions, but they were too busy looting. So we got through. Then halfway between the Syrian border and the Lebanese border, I met the Lebanese driver, and we transferred everything into his car, and then we made it to the Lebanon border, where he paid $50 to the customs to get me through fast, because there were hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people all waiting to process documents and so on to get into
People
Lebanon.
people leaving Syria. Right. So there's a big exodus of people that you spotted at that
Yeah,
time.
I mean, which is ironic because Western media will have you believe that everyone's flooding to go back into
Yeah.
Syria. But the fact is, of course, that the minority sects in Syria that are now under threat of persecution and execution and ethnic cleansing are trying to leave. And in fact, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of Shia Muslim, for example, at the border waiting for the papers to be provided for them to enter Lebanon and then potentially go on to Iraq. But yeah, you know, the level of persecution and the level of absolute kind of wipe clean of the 14 years of crimes committed by these terrorist groups and leaders against the Syrian people is extraordinary, by the likes of the BBC and CNN and all of these dreadful media outlets.
I mean, I'm interested in your backstory on this. What led you to go to Syria in the first place? What changed in your life that made you think I'm going to go to Syria and risk my life? I mean, you seem, can I, if I don't mind me saying, you seem rather casual about what I would be hyperventilating about. You know, the experience of packing my bags just to go to the airport is exciting enough for me, but knowing that there's a mob that are trying to get in, and your dogs and leaving dogs, I mean that's all really difficult for you, but you seem quite calm about it. Is that because you've had similar experiences in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to really condense my background, I mean, my father was one of the most iconic, according to his colleagues, Arabists of his time. He was Middle East advisor to Ernest Bevin, and he and Bevin pushed back against the Jewish settlement in Palestine, and he was always pro-Palestine throughout his career, his diplomatic career. He was ambassador under Nasser during the first Suez crisis, and then he was asked back by Nasser in '67 after the Six-Day War because he was the only British envoy that Nasser trusted. So I kind of grew up in that environment, and again, I'm really trying to condense it. In 2012, I entered Gaza through the tunnels, eventually having had quite a few adventures trying to get in. And then I was there during the Israeli aggression in 2012. I went back in 2013. And then started to understand what was going on in Syria. I joined up with journalist Eva Bartlett, that I'm sure people are well aware of, for her work in Palestine and Syria and Donbass. And she asked me to join the Syria Solidarity Movement, as it was called then, to expose what was going on in Syria, because then it was very clear that Syria was a regime change operation that was being orchestrated by the CIA, the MI6, European intelligence agencies, Turkey, Israel. Israel was behind it from the start because, Syria was the linchpin for the resistance movement. It's the primary chain in the land bridge. So from Iran through Iraq into Syria, into Lebanon, and then into Palestine. But also, Syria manufactures its own weapons. It's not only a transit. It manufactures a lot of the weapons that have been used by Palestinian resistance, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, but definitely in Gaza. And many of the missiles that were sent to Hezbollah came and were manufactured in Syria. So Syria played throughout its history, really, or let's say since the Palestinian struggle began, which was before 1948, Syria has been a really instrumental player in the defense of the Palestinian nationalist cause. And as such, it was targeted for destruction multiple times. I think there's been 75 years of regime change operations since 1946 in Syria. Wow. And of course, the other aspect to that is the fact that Syria had always had strong relations with the Soviet Union prior to its fall in '91, and then also with Russia. So really, the wars or the interference with Syria came because of its alliance with Russia from the very early days. And at that time, it was, of course, portrayed as Syria's pivoting towards communism. We can't have that. And so it was part of the Cold War, and that Cold War really never went away as regards Syria. And so, for me, it became incredibly important to expose what was going on in Syria. I tried to get in 2015. I didn't succeed. It was always quite difficult to get journalist visas, especially as an independent in Syria. And then I finally got in 2016. I'd started exposing the CIA MI6 White Helmets organization, which was established to not only provide kind of cover for the armed groups that the UK was promoting and presenting as being these moderate rebels and these democracy, freedom-loving moderate groups, you know, which of course they never were. They were always extremist, fanatical groups from the likes of, from the roots of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and al-Sham and many foreign mercenaries as well. Even back in 2014, there were foreign mercenaries coming in from all over the world, everywhere, including the UK, the US, the Balkans, Kosovo, you know, Gulf states, and so on, from everywhere, pretty much.
It's hard to really know what's true and what isn't true when the mainstream media that we get is presenting us with something so fake. I'm just going to play a clip, a couple of clips, short clips from CNN report on the release of a prisoner.
I can't tell though, it might just be a blanket, but it's the only cell that's locked. Is he gonna shoot it?
The guard makes us turn the camera off while he shoots the lock off the cell door.
Vanessa?
We go in to get a closer look. It's still not clear if there is something under the blanket.
Oh, it moved. Is there someone there? I thought I saw it move. Is someone there? Or is it just a blanket? I don't know.
I think it's someone. Hello?
Okay, it's just moving.
I'm a civilian, he says. I'm a civilian. He tells the fighter he's from the city of Homs and has been in the cell for 3 months.
Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
He clutches my arm tightly with both hands.
Okay. Does anyone have any water? Water. My. Okay, it's water. It's water. Okay. Okay. Okay, you're okay.
After 3 months in a windowless cell, he can finally see the sky.
انت حر انت حر هلا ضو روح روح يلا حد اعصابك
My God, the light, he says. Oh God, there is light. My God, there is light.
ولا طيران الحمد لله روق خليكم معي
Stay with me, stay with me, he repeats again and again.
الحمد لله خليكم معي خليكم معي إلى 3 شهور.
For 3 months, I didn't know anything about my family. He says. I didn't hear anything about my children.
حيشوفوك هلا حيشوفوك على التلفزيون ما بعرف شو عن أولادي والله ما بعرف شو عن أهلي حيشوفوك.
The fighter hands him something to eat.
لا
He barely lift it to his mouth.
افتحها مجاهد اوكي حط الثاني فوق.
But his body can't handle it.
Okay, you're okay.
His captors fled during the fall of Damascus, leaving him with no food or water. That was at least 4 days ago.
شوي شوي اشرب مي.
I'm shaking, my face is shaking, he says. The rebel tells him there's no more army, no more prisons, no more checkpoints. Are you serious, he says?
سوريا حرة.
Syria harra. Syria is free, he tells him. It's the first time he has heard those words.
No, I mean, it's been pointed out. There's a few things that make it impossible that that's true. One is his beard is very well trimmed for someone
And
who's been
his nails are very well manicured. He's awfully clean.
Yeah, his nails are very, very well done. And it's
ridiculous. Like, I've seen this time and time again. I made a documentary that I recommend everyone watches called The Veto, with a Syrian filmmaker about Arwa Damon, who was the then CNN correspondent on the ground inside Syria, and how they fabricated entire reports. It's available on my YouTube, but you can just search for documentary The Veto, and this will blow this apart. I mean, she's acting like crazy in that. I mean, for God's sake, come on. It's so freaking obvious. And then there was another video where she's talking about this Lebanese guy who's apparently been in the prison for 53 years. And then someone behind her kind of goes, no, he arrived yesterday. He came for hospital treatment. Like, what are you talking about, basically?
Yeah.
And it's
but it's what's the point of this? Are they trying to make out that they have to make as much horror stories as they can?
Yeah, of course. Like, it's going to become the new Holocaust. Sednaya, which was that whole narrative. I mean, a friend of mine took a German media team there to Sednaya in the last 2 days, and they were like, well, okay, where's everything that they've been talking about? It's not there. The Sednaya report made by Amnesty International back in, I think it was 2016 or 2017, was completely backpedaled because everyone pointed out, well, this is just AI evidence. There's no real evidence. And the former, who you must know, Peter Ford, who was the former British ambassador to Syria, completely debunked it. He said, it's impossible. I've been to the prison. I know what it looks like. And there's no way that any of the things that you're talking about even exist. And so they're rehashing the same narrative from 2017. It didn't work in 2017, but it's working now because basically who's the media on the ground? Western media, which was responsible for the regime change against Syria, any war against Syria anyway. I'm not there. There's no independent journalists. Syrian journalists are too terrified right now to say anything against, what are going to be the dominant narratives. And they're creating the Holocaust narrative while ignoring the fact that Israel is literally sodomizing prisoners in State Amman in Palestine. That's only one prison, right? It's happening, and it's been happening in Israel for decades. Saudi Arabia, the CIA black sites, Abu Ghraib, Camp Bucca, and so on, that actually were the sites of the incubation of all of these terrorist groups and entities, like Jolani, who's now acting president, or whatever he calls himself, of Syria, who was originally ISIS, then became Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda, and then formed the coalition of all of the most extremist groups in Syria to become HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And so,
he had a CNN treatment, didn't he? He had a CNN interview.
But not only CNN. When was it? 2020. He did that interview with PBS. What's his name? Martin Smith. And they cleaned him up because he was a serious kind of fanatic for years.
So they've been doing this cleanup with Jolani for a while then. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, part of the reason I wanted to show that clip was how ridiculous it was to see this sort of faked up story. I mean, the other thing is that going into this prison, and there's just by chance there's one cell that nobody's bothered to
with one
check.
person lying under a
There's
blanket,
a guy
as if he wouldn't have moved.
But that's the journalism that we're expected to swallow. And when I looked up your Wikipedia, this is you're given. You're within, well, I don't know, 10 words. You're kind of known for sharing conspiracy theories and disinformation. I mean, the whole thing is a stitch up. I mean, what you've just told me about your background and how much you've been investigating the whole Middle East and how you've gone to all these places and met all these people. I mean, the fact that you're being put down in that way, and this woman who's not a particularly good actress is getting all the plaudits for being so brave going in there, and this man not nearly puking on her with the food that he couldn't quite digest. It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen this I started really investigating and following it all from 2015 onwards, but for the the 4 years before that, it was ongoing, and the stories were insane and proven to be insane. They were proven to be completely scripted and you know, amateur dramatics from our Damon. I mean, I don't know if people remember her sniffing the backpack in Idlib after the alleged chemical weapon attack in Douma in 2018 in the eastern suburbs of Damascus. And the people that left the suburbs in the green buses to Idlib, the terrorists and their families, when they arrived, she was in Idlib and she was sniffing people's backpacks saying, yeah, there was definitely a chemical weapon attack.
Oh,
Even
wow.
though the OPCW inspectors who were on the ground, the organization for the prohibition of chemical weapons, even though they have later said that the entire report is bunkum and there were no chemical weapons used in that attack, or actually in any of the attacks in Syria by the Syrian government and army. They were used by the terrorist groups under the control of the West and Israel and so on. But no, yeah.
But your reputation, I mean, does that upset you that you see that?
No, why? I mean, you know, for me, I had about, gosh, I think it was a good 5 years of non-stop smearing by mainstream media, including being on the front, no, in the center page of the Times, having a 15-episode series made about me, pretty much about me, but about Syria. But I was in every episode by the BBC. Having my car in Syria put on the front page of the BBC website, like basically doxing me in Syria. I have a bright pink Volkswagen Beetle. It's the cheapest car you can buy in Syria, so that's why I ended up with it. But it was put on the front page of the BBC website. So now, of course, I'm getting threats on X and so on. Oh, we know you. We'll find your car and we'll find you, because the BBC gave them that information. I was detained in Heathrow back in 2021, I think, at the behest of the BBC, I'm pretty sure, because the information that was given to me in the interrogation that went on for 6 hours was basically related to a BBC sting operation. Well, it wasn't their sting operation, but they were well aware of what was going on against one of the academics that we were all working with on the OPCW case to expose it as a complete hoax. So, you know, they've been coming after me for years. What I tend to try to see it as is an opportunity for me, for my work to get better known, because even if people kind of read the BBC and they read this report, they're let's say their curiosity is piqued. So many people were going and then looking at my work and going, oh, she seems quite credible, actually. I mean, I did actually receive quite a few emails and messages saying, well, I'm really glad I found you, thanks to the BBC trying to smear you. So I tended to kind of, because I wasn't going to give them the benefit of getting to me. So I was just like basically on social media saying, gee, thanks, guys. Like, I've got another few thousand followers thanks to you. So keep going, you know.